HOA, Karen threatened to press charges on my property. She didn't expect the county inspector to show up. Brenda was on the other side of my fence, neon leggings glowing like a warning sign, phone held up and recording. This is disgusting. I am done with this. Eleanor, I'm pressing charges. You hear me? I'm pressing charges. Behind me, my hens clucked lazily in their spotless coop. The piglets snuffled in fresh straw. The air smelled like hay, and a little manure, Texas normal, nothing rotten. I stood there in my red flannel and boots, one hand on a clean stainless steel milk pail, the other resting on the fence post. Brenda pinched her nose dramatically, glancing at her camera like she was auditioning for a reality show. People don't move into an HOA to live next to a farm, Eleanor. I'll have the board fine you into selling this place. The neighbors across the street had just left with jars of milk and a carton of eggs. They watched from their driveway, confused, clutching their groceries like they'd walked into the wrong episode. In my head, I repeated her words, press charges on my property. That was the moment something quietly clicked. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue zoning law with a woman in a neon sports bra. I just smiled and said, okay, Brenda, put it in writing. Because I already knew the only thing I was about to press was submit. If you've ever dealt with an HOA bully, hit subscribe. This is where her showboating ended and my paperwork started. I didn't always have pigs and a half-acre of raised beds in my backyard. When I bought this house in Fort Worth 8 years ago, all I wanted was a little quiet and a patch of grass big enough to remind me of the farm I grew up on. I walked into that open house in my red flannel, jeans, and boots, and the realtor gave me that quick up-and-down look like I was lost. Then I stepped out back. Big yard, deep lot, decent privacy fence. And just beyond the subdivision, you could see open pasture and hear faint mooing when the wind was right. Feels like home, I'd said, running my hand over the fence rail. I read every page of the HOA documents before I signed. Not skimmed, read. My daddy didn't raise fools. I highlighted anything about nuisance, livestock, structures, and use of property. What I saw was strict about junk cars and party noise, vague about pets and odors, and completely silent about backyard hens. So I moved in, unpacked my canning jars, and started small. A little herb bed by the patio, then tomatoes, then a couple of raised beds. I'd be out there in the evening, hat shading my glasses, hands in the soil, and neighbors would walk by with strollers and dogs. Smells like my grandma's place. One of them, Mark, said. He was an IT guy, soft around the middle, holding a toddler on his hip. In a good way. Come back in a few months. I told him, I'll have more than smell. By year 2, I'd added 6 hens. Clean coop, automatic waterer, sand in the run so it never turned into a swamp. I kept a little notebook, feed schedule, cleanings, egg count, old habit from the farm. You take care of animals, right? They take care of you. The first time I walked up to the community mailbox with a dozen brown eggs in a carton, you'd think I was Santa. People lit up. You sure? What do we owe you? Just bring the carton back, I'd say, smiling, and maybe don't vote for anyone who hates omelets. That became my thing. Jars of milk. Once I brought in a dairy goat, blocks of cheese after I got my timing right, butter on holidays. My kitchen looked like a small creamery some weekends. Cream separator humming, stainless steel pails lined up, my hands moving on autopilot. For a while, it felt perfect. Kids from 3 houses over would lean on the fence and watch the hens scratch. Older neighbors would drop off empty jars and gossip. Even the HOA, as far as I could tell, stayed quiet. We had a president back then, Mr. Dalton, who was more interested in keeping the pool filters running than micromanaging people's yards. He'd wave when he drove by my place. Once, He even bought cheese for his church potluck. And for a long stretch, it really seemed like we'd struck a balance. Suburbia in the front, little slice of country in the back. Nobody complained. Nobody gagged at the smell. I cleaned every day, logged every cleaning, kept the manure composted and covered. If you'd told me then that a neon-clad HOA Karen with a smartphone and a superiority complex was going to declare war on my compost pile, I would have laughed. But peaceful neighborhoods have a way of attracting people who think peace is boring. Because right about the time my neighbors started calling my place the mini farm with pride was when Brenda moved in down the street. And her first friendly visit wasn't friendly at all. Brenda didn't come in hot right away. At first, it was just weird. She moved in 3 houses down that spring. Neon leggings, sports bra, big white SUV. The first time I saw her, she was marching past my place on a power walk, phone strapped to her arm, music leaking out of her earbuds. She slowed when she hit my fence line. The hens were scratching near the coop, piglets asleep in the shade. She actually stepped off the sidewalk onto my grass, hands on hips, nostrils flaring like she was sniffing for contraband. I wiped my hands on my flannel and nodded. Afternoon. She gave me a tight smile. Hi, I'm Brenda, new HOA board member. She said it like a badge. Eleanor, I replied. Welcome to the neighborhood. Her eyes flicked over my boots, my hat, then the animals. So this is a lot, don't you think? That's just my girls and a few piglets, I said lightly. I keep everything clean. Ask around. She wrinkled her nose. HOAs usually don't allow livestock. It's not really the aesthetic. HOA documents don't mention backyard hens. I said, calm. I checked before I moved in. She pulled out her phone. Well, maybe they should. I'll bring it up with the board. Then she power walked away like she'd just burned an extra 50 calories from disapproval. I shrugged it off. People have opinions. Opinions aren't rules. The first actual hit came a week later in my mailbox. A pale yellow, friendly reminder from the HOA. Subject, possible nuisance/odor concern. It was all vague language. We have received a concern about potential odors and livestock-like activity on your property. Please ensure you are in compliance with community standards. No section cited. No rule number. Just concern. I sat at my kitchen table with a jar of cooling yogurt, read it twice, and felt that little spark in my chest. Not anger. Focus. I pulled out a fresh sheet of printer paper and typed my response. To the board, thank you for your letter dated date. Please clarify which specific section and clause of the HOACC and RS you believe I am violating, and provide copies of any relevant regulations or complaints. I am eager to remain in full compliance. Sincerely, Eleanor, last name. Printed, signed, scanned, emailed and dropped a hard copy in the HOA's little black mailbox by the pool. 2 days later, I saw Brenda at the community mailbox with another neighbor, Paige. She was talking loud enough for me to hear as I walked up. I mean, it's just unsanitary. Brenda said, gesturing toward my yard with her water bottle. This is a family neighborhood, not a petting zoo. Paige glanced at me, embarrassed. Eleanor's eggs are the only ones my kids will eat, she said gently, and it doesn't smell. Brenda's smile went razor thin. Some people are just used to farm smells. She didn't look at me when she said it, like I was an object in the background. I opened my mailbox, pulled out a coupon pack, and said, Morning. Come. Level. Inside, though, I filed that sentence away with the yellow notice. In my head, a new folder had just opened. HOA, Brenda. That day, I thought I was just dealing with a fussy new neighbor. I had no idea that little yellow, friendly reminder was just the HOA testing the water. And if you've already had one of those friendly reminders escalate out of nowhere, hit like you're going to recognize exactly what came next. The next few weeks felt like living next to a podcast where the only topic was me. Brenda didn't just file a concern and move on. She started a whole campaign. It began with the walks. Every evening around 6, right when I'd be topping off waters or raking the run, she'd march past with her neon posse, 2 other moms in pastel leggings, one pushing a stroller. Brenda would slow at my fence, lower her voice just enough to pretend I couldn't hear, and say things like, "Some people bring down property values and don't even care." One of the other women, Jenna, whispered, "But my kids love her goats," and Brenda snapped back, "That's not the point. This is supposed to be a nice neighborhood." Then came the notes. Not official HOA letters. Those I could at least file. These were anonymous printouts, slid under my doormat or taped to my mailbox. "Please be considerate with smells. This isn't a farm. Other people have to live here too." All caps, bold, no names. I picked each one up with 2 fingers, like a specimen, laid it flat on my kitchen table, snapped a photo with my phone, dated it in my notebook, and slipped it into a clear sleeve in a new binder. HOA, Brenda, social. Across the street, Mark and Paige started noticing. One Saturday, I was handing Paige a jar of milk when she hesitated. "Hey, did you see the Facebook group?" I don't do HOA Facebook drama. I'd rather scrub a water trough. I shook my head. She bit her lip. Brenda posted about unsanitary backyard, livestock threatening community health. Didn't name you, but everyone knows who she means. I could feel my jaw tighten. And what did the comments say? A couple of people freaked out. She admitted. But then half the neighborhood jumped in like, "Eleanor's place is cleaner than my kitchen." There's a bit of a war going. That night, I broke my rule and logged in. There it was, Brenda's post. A blurry zoomed-in photo of my coop over the fence captioned with dramatic language about feces, odors, and children playing nearby. Underneath, a small civil war. "Honestly, I walk by and smell nothing." One neighbor wrote, "My kids love feeding her chickens." Another said, "Calm down, Brenda." Brenda shot back on every comment. "You may be used to it, but some of us moved here for civilization. Not everyone wants to live next to farm animals. This will hurt resale." I didn't comment. I took screenshots, printed the entire thread. Into the binder it went. The isolation effort ramped up. The next HOA, community coffee, at the clubhouse, Brenda stood by the donut table like a queen bee, voice bright and fake. "I mean, it's not personal," I heard her say as I walked in. "I just think we have to hold people to standards. There's a reason we have an HOA." A couple of newer neighbors glanced at me, then away, like I'd walked into a classroom after a rumor. The air shifted. That subtle, sticky feeling when people have been talking about you and don't know whether to keep their distance or apologize. I poured myself burnt coffee, felt the weight of eyes on my back, and smiled at Mr. Walters, the retired firefighter from the corner lot. "Morning," I said. He grinned. "Got any more of that cheese?" Loud enough for Brenda to hear. Her jaw tightened. By the next board newsletter, the campaign went official. A little box on page 2, titled "Maintaining Neighborhood Aesthetics and Odor Control," talking about recent issues and remembering we are a residential, not agricultural community. No names, no addresses, just enough to make anyone flipping pages picture my red flannel and boots. I circled it in red pen, wrote the date, slid it into the binder. What Brenda didn't know was that every whisper, every vague email, every cute, little passive-aggressive line in that newsletter was turning into evidence. I wasn't just the lady with chickens anymore. I was the woman with a growing paper trail. They thought they were building a story about how I didn't belong here. But the HOA still hadn't realized. Every gossip, every gentle reminder, Every post was going straight into a folder with their name on it. The day it stopped being gossip and turned into war started like any other. Me in my red flannel, scraping yesterday's bedding into the compost. Sun just high enough to sting the back of my neck. I heard the golf cart before I saw it. Little electric whine. Then the crunch of tires on the street out front. I wiped my hands on my jeans, peeked around the corner of the barn, and there she was, Brenda, in highlighter yellow leggings, steering the HOA golf cart like a SWAT vehicle. Next to her sat Todd, the timid HOA secretary, clutching a manila folder. She parked at the curb, hopped out with a clipboard, and marched straight up my driveway. "Eleanor," she sang, voice too bright, "we've given you ample opportunities to comply." Todd couldn't even meet my eyes. I took off my gloves, calm. "Morning, Brenda." "Todd." She shoved a stack of papers at me. Red stamp across the top. Final notice, violation and fine. I flipped through. 4 separate violations suddenly appeared. Livestock prohibited, odor nuisance, unapproved structure, unsightly conditions. Each with running daily fines backdated 30 days. At the bottom, balance due $4,750. 00. My stomach dropped, then settled into something like steel. Section and clause? I asked quietly. Brenda tapped the page with her pink gel pen. Article 8, Section 3, nuisance. And Article 5, aesthetics. The board has determined your operation is out of compliance. You have 10 days to remove all animals and associated structures, or we'll send this to collections and begin legal proceedings. Todd winced. "So you've invented 4 violations out of 2 vague paragraphs." I said, "Still level, and backdated fines a month." "It's not invented," she snapped. "The board voted. And, frankly, the smell alone," she clamped 2 fingers over her nose, loud for effect. "My kids can't even play outside. This is a health hazard." Behind us, one of my hens let out a dignified cluck, like she was offended by the slander. I looked at the total again. $4,750. For a woman who cans her own tomatoes and buys feed in bulk, that wasn't pocket change. That was mortgage money. "For the record," I said, my voice dropping, "I'm asking you right now, are you alleging any violation of city or county health codes? Or just HOA aesthetics?" Brenda's chin lifted. "If you don't comply, I'll have no choice but to escalate this. I can and will contact animal control and the police. I will press charges if necessary. You're not above the law just because you grew up on a farm." There it was again. Press charges. Like she was the DA. I held her gaze. "Put every allegation you just made in writing. Every single one. Date it and sign it on behalf of the HOA." She smirked. "Already did." She tapped the packet. "Consider this your last warning." Then she turned to Todd. "Let's go. We have other properties to check." They rolled away in that ridiculous golf cart, Brenda already pulling out her phone, angling it toward my yard like she was shooting B-roll for her personal crusade. I stood there with the packet in my hand, the number $4,750 burning into my vision. For a second, I felt that old, hot farm kid temper flare. Wanted to chase her down, wave the rules in her face, drag her to the back fence, and make her smell how clean it really was. Instead, I walked inside, laid the packet on my kitchen table, and flipped open my binder. Yellow friendly reminder. Newsletter snippet. Screenshots of Facebook posts. Anonymous notes. Now, final notice, violation, and fine. I smoothed the pages, snapped photos of each, scanned them into my laptop, and slid the originals into a new tab section. Fines and threats. My hand stopped shaking as soon as the hole punch clicked. That was the moment I understood. They weren't going to stop at embarrassment. They were willing to threaten my home. I set my coffee down, opened a fresh page in my logbook, and wrote, received backdated fines, and threat of legal action. Time to escalate, but not the way they think. Because if Brenda wanted to play with money, procedure, and charges, fine. She was about to find out what happens when someone who actually respects the rules decides to use every single one of them. And since you've made it this far into my little war story, drop a comment with your worst HOA threat, because what she did next makes this fine packet look tame. I grew up with a dad who said, if it isn't written down, it didn't happen. Out on the farm, that meant feed logs and vet bills. In an HOA neighborhood, it meant something else, leverage. I sat at my kitchen table, red flannel sleeves rolled up, that $4,750. Final notice spread out beside my binder. My hands still smelled faintly of hay and bleach. I opened my laptop, slipped on my glasses, and stopped being the chicken lady in my head. I switched into my other role, the woman who reads every line. First, I pulled up the HOA CC and RS on my screen. I'd saved the PDF the day I closed on the house. Search bar, livestock. One vague line about no commercial operations. Nothing about a handful of hens for personal use. Search, odor, buried in nuisance, totally subjective, no standards, no reference to city or county code. Then I opened a new document and started typing like I was back in school. Dear Board, I am in receipt of your final notice, violation, and fine dated polite, dry, precise. I asked for their basis in writing. Exact article, section, and clause for each alleged violation. Dates and records of every complaint, minutes from any meetings where my property was discussed, and copies of any correspondence with city, county, or animal control regarding my address. At the bottom, I added one quiet line. Per Texas law and our governing documents, please consider this a formal request for records from the association within the statutory time frame. No yelling, no threats, just deadlines. Next tab, the county website. Zoning map. Our subdivision was still technically agricultural residential. That little AR code on the PDF might as well have been a golden ticket. One more tab, Tarrant County Public Health, Environmental Division. They had a whole page on animal keeping and nuisance odors, quantifiable standards, setback distances, manure management. It read like a checklist of things I already did by habit. I picked up my little spiral notebook, the one where I'd been scribbling cleaned coop and changed bedding for months, and realized it was about to become Exhibit A. The HOA thought this was about their feelings. I knew better now. This was about jurisdiction. And on anything resembling health or charges, Brenda wasn't the sheriff in town. I drafted another letter, this one to a different audience. Dear County Code Compliance and Environmental Health, I am a resident at address. My HOA has alleged that my legally kept backyard animals are creating a health hazard and odor nuisance and has threatened to involve law enforcement. I take sanitation seriously and would like to request an official inspection of my property so there is a clear record with your office. I maintain logs of cleaning, photos of conditions, and am happy to comply with any applicable ordinances. I attached photos. Spotless coop, covered compost, labeled feed containers, the distance from my barn to the property line measured with a tape. Then I scan my notebook pages, date by date. Coop scraped, fresh straw, manure hauled to compost. Decades of habit suddenly looked like the neatest little defense file you ever saw. When I hit submit on that county contact form and dropped my certified letters to the HOA in the outgoing mail slot, something in my chest unclenched. I wasn't begging Brenda for permission to live on my own property anymore. I was inviting the people who actually had authority to come look for themselves. From that moment, I stopped reacting. I started planning, because I knew if the county put in writing that my place was clean and compliant, then every threat Brenda made after that wouldn't just be annoying. It would be documented abuse of power in a folder with her signature on it. And I wasn't done collecting, not by a long shot. Once I hit send on those letters, my mornings got a new routine. Feed the hens. Check. Scrub the waterers. Check. Log it. 7:10 a.m. Refreshed water. Dry bedding, no odor. Check. Then coffee, red flannel sleeves rolled up, and my binder. I added new tabs with my label maker. Notices, photos, logs, county. It felt ridiculous and powerful all at once, like building a legal bomb out of paper and patience. Every time Brenda so much as breathed in my direction, I logged it. May 12th, 6:03 p.m. Brenda paused at fence, pinched nose, commented loud enough for sidewalk. Can't believe we live next to this disgusting farm. No noticeable odor. Coop cleaned 9:20 a.m. See log. If she posted another dramatic Facebook rant, I screenshotted the post and every comment, printed it, highlighted any words like health hazard or violations, and filed it. If an anonymous note showed up, I slid it into a plastic sleeve and wrote the date in the corner. The HOA responded to my certified letter with the enthusiasm of a teenager told to clean their room. 2 weeks later, I got a thin envelope, 3 meeting minutes with half the paragraphs blacked out for privacy, and a 1-page summary insisting the board had full discretion to define nuisances. No rule citations. No actual complaints attached. Just, the board has determined. I wrote in the margin, did not answer request. Then I opened a fresh email. Dear Board, thank you for your partial response. Please provide unredacted records of complaints with personal information removed, as allowed by statute, and specific governing document citations for each alleged violation. Also, please confirm whether any city, county, or state agencies have been contacted regarding my property. Sincerely, Eleanor. Send. Print. Binder. Meanwhile, I waited for a reply from the county like a kid waits for Christmas. It came 3 days later. Subject line. Request for inspection, backyard animals. Ms. Last name. We can schedule a site visit to verify compliance with county health and environmental codes. Our inspector will be in your area next week. Please confirm availability. Regards. Name. Environmental health/code compliance. I exhaled so hard my glasses fogged. I replied immediately, any day, any time. You're welcome to inspect the entire property. I'll have logs and photos available. Then I circled the date on my calendar in red and underlined it twice. The week leading up to that visit, I didn't change a thing. I didn't panic clean. I just did what I always did. Only now, every scoop of clean shavings and every trip to the compost got a timestamp. May 19 to 6:45 a.m. Mucked pig pen, no standing water, manure moved to covered compost. 7:30 a.m. Coop scraped, fresh sand and run. My little spiral notebook started to look like a technician's log at a lab. Neighbors noticed my new level of precision. Everything okay? Mark asked one evening as I measured the distance from the barn to the fence with a tape and snapped a photo. Just getting my ducks. Well, pigs in a row? I said. County inspector's coming. His eyebrows shot up. You called the county on yourself? I invited them. I corrected. If Brenda's going to throw around health hazard and press charges, I want someone who actually has jurisdiction to say what's what. He grinned. Remind me never to get on your bad side. Eleanor. I laughed. I don't have a bad side. I have a paperwork side. The night before the visit, I laid everything out on my dining table like I was setting up a war room. Binder open to the Logs tab. Printed county code sections highlighted. photos in chronological order, HOA letters, and my certified mail receipts fanned neatly, the red stamps almost festive. By then, Brenda had escalated her performance. Twice that week, she'd stopped her power walk right at my property line, turned her phone to selfie mode with my barn behind her, and recorded. "This is what we're dealing with," she said into the lens. "Animal waste, smells, and the board is doing everything we can, but some people just don't care about rules." I watched from the shade of the porch, unseen, and took my own quiet photo of her filming, timestamped it, and slid it into harassment visual. I didn't confront her. I didn't post a rebuttal. I just wrote in my notebook, May 21st, 6:12 p.m. Brenda filming at property line, claiming animal waste, smells. Conditions: dry, clean, mild breeze, no odor. See photos. At that point, all I needed was one more thing: for Brenda to lean all the way into her own story in front of someone who wasn't impressed by neon leggings and a clipboard. So when the county finally confirmed the exact date and time of the inspection, I didn't just mark my calendar. I let one very specific email from the HOA sit unanswered just long enough to guarantee Brenda would be there too, because I'd seen enough of her to know if she thought there was going to be a showdown about health hazards on my property, she'd race to be front and center. And all I had to do now was give her the perfect chance to step right into the middle of her own mess. If you're still with me while I line up every boring little detail, hit subscribe, because the next part is where Brenda's performance meets someone who actually knows what a violation looks like. The bait didn't look like bait. It looked like me, in my red flannel and hat, rinsing a stainless steel pail at the outdoor sink while the sun burned off the morning haze. 2 days before the county visit, the HOA sent an email titled Urgent Compliance Inspection. It was from Brenda's board address, all bluster. Due to continuing health and odor concerns involving your property, a board representative will be conducting an on-site inspection Thursday at 9 a.m. Failure to cooperate may result in further fines and legal action. 9 a.m. Thursday just happened to be the exact time the county inspector had confirmed with me. I stared at the screen and smiled. There was my perfect overlap. I didn't argue. I didn't reply, "You have no authority to inspect my barn." I answered short and sweet. "I will be available Thursday at 9 a.m. for any lawful inspections. Please bring copies of all alleged complaints for my records. Send, print, binder." Then I made one more move. I forwarded Brenda's email to the county contact and wrote, "Just FYI, my HOA is scheduling an inspection at the same time. Since their allegations involve health hazards, I'd appreciate your office present, so we're all on the same page." The inspector replied within an hour, "Understood. We'll be there as planned." So Thursday morning, I did what I always do. I fed, I cleaned, I logged. 8:02 a.m. Refreshed bedding, no standing waste, light breeze, no detectable odor. I snapped a wide-angle photo of the coop and pens, time-stamped, and tucked my notebook into my back pocket. At 8:55, I set my binder on the patio table, tabs fanned out, notices, photos, logs, county. I poured myself coffee and waited. Right on cue, I heard the electric whine of the HOA golf cart, and a minute later, the deeper rumble of a county truck. Brenda rolled up in neon pink this time, clipboard in hand, phone already recording. Behind her, a white county pickup eased to the curb. A man in khakis and a county logo polo stepped out, clipboard of his own, ID badge swinging. Brenda's face lit up when she saw him. "Oh, great, you made it," she said, striding toward him like she'd summoned him. "I'm Brenda, HOA president. We've been having a serious situation with this property. I'm pressing charges," and he held up a hand, calm. Ma'am, I'm here on Ms. Last name. S request for an environmental health inspection. County jurisdiction. Not HOA enforcement. The smile stalled on her face. I wiped my hands on my jeans, stepped forward. Morning. You must be Mr. Hayes? He nodded. Yes, ma'am. You, Eleanor? That's me. Thanks for coming. I've got my cleaning logs and copies of all the HOA's allegations ready for you. Brenda blinked. Your request, she repeated. No, I'm the one who filed concerns. This is an HOA matter. We need to verify these animals are creating a nuisance so we can move forward with fines and, if necessary, charges. Mr. Hayes flipped open his folder, unfazed. Our office has no record of any complaint from the HOA on this address. He said evenly, we do have Ms. Last name, S written request for inspection, and her photos. That's why I'm here. I watched the color creep up Brenda's neck. That's impossible, she snapped. I've told the board, for weeks, we need to involve the authorities. There are smells, waste, this is unsanitary. My kids. Okay, he said, still professional. Then let's do this by the book. I'll inspect the property, check for any code or health violations. If there's an issue, I'll document it. If there's not, I'll document that too. Brenda hesitated, then squared her shoulders. Fine, I'm coming along. As president, I have a duty to protect the neighborhood. She turned her phone toward herself, angling me and the barn in the background. We're here today to address a serious health hazard. Mr. Hayes cut in just a touch firmer. For the record, ma'am, this is a voluntary inspection requested by the homeowner. This is not a criminal investigation. There are no charges being pressed, and the HOA doesn't have police powers. The word police hung there a second, heavier than her neon outfit. I gestured toward the gate. Y'all want to start with the coop? Brenda stepped through like she was walking onto a crime scene. Mr. Hayes followed, eye scanning, pen ready. I could have argued with Brenda's theatrics for weeks. Instead, I'd given her exactly what she wanted, a big, official-looking confrontation about my disgusting farm, but on my terms with someone present whose job was to care about facts, not Facebook. And as we walked toward the animals, with Brenda still filming and Mr. Hayes already noting how clean everything looked, I knew she'd taken the bait. All that was left was for the inspection to do its work. Mr. Hayes started at the coop, pen ticking quietly against his clipboard. Brenda kept her phone up like she was streaming live to the Supreme Court. The smell is just, she began. He cut her off gently. Ma'am, I'll note any odors or violations myself. Thank you. He stepped into the run, crouched, pushed a boot into the sand. Drainage is good, he murmured. No standing waste. He pointed to the covered compost bins. Manure's contained. How often do you clean? Daily, I said. I pulled my little spiral notebook from my back pocket and flipped it open. Here, dates, times. Coop scraped, bedding replaced. Every day. He skimmed a few pages, eyebrows lifting. You keep better logs than most commercial operations, he said. Brenda snorted. She knew you were coming. Of course, she cleaned it up for you. He stood, took a slow breath of the air. Right now, there's no significant odor, he said evenly, just normal animal smell, well within our guidelines. He nodded toward my barn. Let's see the rest. We walked past the pig pen, then the small paddock where my 2 steers flicked their tails lazily. He checked setback distances with a tape, measured from the barn wall to the fence line, compared it to a printout of county code. You're in agricultural residential zoning, he said loud enough for Brenda to hear. Animals are permitted at this density. Manure is contained. No fly breeding, no runoff. As far as the county's concerned, you're compliant. Brenda's voice, went sharper. What about health hazards? I reported health hazards. My kids gag, walking past here. He turned to her. Again, ma'am, our office has no record of any complaint from you or the HOA. The only written request we received was from Ms. Last name, asking us to inspect her own property. I set my binder on the tailgate of his truck and flipped it open. I do have written complaints, I said quietly, from the HOA. Brenda's head snapped toward me. Those are confidential board communications, she snapped. They're addressed to me? I replied, not confidential. Mr. Hayes accepted the packet. I slid out. The yellow friendly reminder, the vague odor notes, the final notice, violation and fine with $4,750 at the bottom. He read, jaw tightening just a hair. Backdated daily fines. He said, for health hazard and livestock based purely on HOA nuisance language. He glanced at my logs and the clean yard behind us, and no one called my office. Brenda tried to recover. We were about to. That's why I said I'd press charges. I have a duty to... Ma'am, he interrupted. Firmer now, you don't press charges over zoning or odors. Law enforcement does that, based on statutes and evidence. What you have is a civil HOA dispute. And from what I see, your association has been representing this as a health hazard without any verification from the authorities that actually handle health hazards. Todd, who'd slunk up behind us sometime during the walkthrough, swallowed hard. We were just following the president's lead. He muttered, Mr. Hayes looked from him to Brenda, then back to me. For the record, he said, flipping to a fresh page on his form, I'm going to note in my report that this property is clean, compliant with county animal keeping and environmental codes, and presents no nuisance as defined by our regulations. He tapped the HOA letter. If anyone suggests otherwise to you again, you can refer them to this report number. What about the fines? I asked, still calm. They've threatened collections and legal action if I don't pay. That's between you and the HOA, he said carefully. But I can tell you this. If an association claims health or sanitation as the basis for enforcement, and we've certified there's no issue, that's problematic, especially if they continue to use my office as a scare tactic. Brenda's face had gone from neon pink leggings to neon red cheeks. So you're taking her side, she snapped. You don't care about the rest of us who don't want to live next to a barn. He met her glare without flinching. I don't take sides. I enforce code. And the code says she's allowed to have animals here as long as she manages them properly. She does. He held up the HOA packet. What concerns me is this kind of language. Legal action, health hazard, press charges being thrown around without any factual basis. Todd finally spoke up, voice small. Brenda, maybe we should talk to the attorney before we send anything else. She rounded on him. We already voted on this, Todd. Then, to me, you can play farm all you want, but this is still an HOA. You don't get to win just because you found one inspector having a good day. Mr. Hayes snapped his folder shut. This isn't about winning, he said. It's about what's on paper. My report, your letters, her logs. If this ever ends up in front of a judge, only one of you has documentation that lines up with reality. He handed me a copy of his preliminary form. At the top in block letters, it read, NO violations observed. Underneath, property maintained in a sanitary, code-compliant manner. Livestock permitted under current zoning. I slid it into a plastic sleeve in my binder, right next to Brenda's final notice. The contrast between the two made me want to laugh. Brenda saw it too. For the first time since she'd moved in, she looked unsure. Phone slack at her side, clipboard hanging. Just so we're clear, Mr. Hayes said, looking straight at her, if the HOA continues to threaten health or sanitation actions after this report, using my office as justification, that could be considered misrepresentation, maybe even harassment. I'd advise your board to tread carefully. He tipped his cap to me. Ma'am, you keep good records. If you have any more trouble, give our office a call. Then he climbed into his truck and drove off, leaving Brenda standing in my driveway, neon bright and suddenly very, very small. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something cutting, then glanced at the paper in my binder that said NO violations and thought better of it. She spun on her heel, stalked back to the golf cart, and peeled away without another word. Exposing Brenda in front of the inspector, that wasn't the end, because once the county put in writing that my place was clean, every fine, every threat, every press charges, outburst she'd thrown at me became something much uglier on paper. And that was exactly where I planned to hurt the HOA next. If you were standing there with me in that driveway, watching her deflate, tell me in the comments what single sentence you'd have loved to say to Brenda right then, because the fallout from that little visit hit her, where she really lived, her money and her power. Brenda peeled out of my driveway like she could outrun the word NO violations stamped on that form. I watched the golf cart disappear, then went straight to my patio table. I laid the county report next to the HOA's final notice, violation and fine. 2 pieces of paper, side by side. One said I was a menace. The other, from the only people who actually had jurisdiction, said I was clean and compliant. That contrast was my hammer. I took a deep breath, slid on my glasses, and opened a fresh document on my laptop. Dear Board of Directors, I typed, I am in receipt of your final notice, violation and fine dated date, claiming health and odor nuisances and threatening legal action. Today, at my request, Tarrant County Environmental Health conducted a full inspection of my property. Their written report, attached, finds 0 violations of county health, sanitation, or animal keeping codes, and confirms that livestock are permitted under current zoning. I let that sentence sit a second, then kept going. In light of this official finding, your allegations of health hazard and threats to involve law enforcement appear to be unfounded and misleading. Accordingly, 1. I demand immediate written confirmation that all fines and violations related to my animals are rescinded. 2. I demand correction of any HOA records falsely suggesting that my property presented a health or sanitation issue. 3. I request copies of all complaints, internal emails, and meeting minutes related to enforcement actions against my property as previously requested and still outstanding. Polite, cold, surgical. I added one more paragraph, the quiet knife under the table. Additionally, please be advised that any further threats of legal action or pressing charges premised on alleged health or safety issues after the attached county finding may constitute harassment and abuse of process. If this continues, I will have no choice but to explore all remedies available to me under Texas law and to share this documentation with appropriate oversight and legal channels. No screaming, no name calling, just here are the facts, here's the paper trail, here's the hint of what comes next if you keep pushing. I signed it, attached a scan of Mr. Hayes' report, and hit send to the official HOA email. Then I printed 3 copies, slipped one into my binder, and sent the other 2 certified, one to the management company, one to the HOA's registered address on file with the state. Next, I opened a new email and forwarded the whole chain to Mr. Hayes. Thank you again for your time today. I wrote, for your records, here is how my HOA has represented the situation to me. I wanted your office to be aware in case your name continues to be used to justify baseless enforcement. His reply came back that afternoon. Understood. Your property file reflects no violations. If the HOA continues to misrepresent that, feel free to have your counsel contact our office for confirmation. Counsel? I didn't even need a lawyer's name yet. Just having a county official put that in writing was enough to make most HOAs flinch. 2 days of silence went by. No golf cart, no notes, no neon at my fence. I just fed my animals, logged my cleanings, and pretended not to notice how still the neighborhood Facebook group was. On day 3, an email popped up from the management company. Not Brenda. Dear Ms. Last name. After review of the county inspection report and consultation with Association Counsel, the board has elected to rescind all violation notices and fines related to animals and odors on your property. Your account balance is now $0. 00. We regret any distress this matter may have caused. No apology for the threats. No acknowledgement that they'd overstepped. But attached was a ledger showing every single fine crossed out. I printed it, highlighted the $0. 00, and slid it into my binder under a new tab, Resolutions. An hour later, the neighborhood Facebook group lit up. Did anyone else just get a correction email from the HOA about past fines? One neighbor posted. Yeah, another wrote. They just reversed our landscape violation from last year out of nowhere. Mark texted me a screenshot. Looks like your little war shook something loose. He wrote, they're quietly backing off a bunch of old nonsense. Later that week, a notice went out for a special members meeting. Agenda item, executive session, review of enforcement procedures, and board conduct. Translation, the board's lawyer had read my letter, seen that county report, and realized Brenda hadn't just misjudged a smell. She'd walked the entire HOA right up to the edge of legal trouble and dangled them over it. When I walked past the clubhouse that night with a basket of eggs for Paige, I could see through the blinds. Brenda at the end of the table, shoulders tight, hands flying as she talked. The rest of the board looking like people who'd just learned there's security footage of the prank they thought no one saw. No one yelled. No one stormed out. But a week later, a brief email went to the whole neighborhood. Effective immediately, Brenda, last name, has resigned her position as HOA president for personal reasons. The board thanks her for her service. Sure they did. From then on, the newsletters got very careful. No more dramatic odor boxes. Every violation notice that went out in the subdivision suddenly came with exact rule citations and a little disclaimer at the bottom. This does not constitute a criminal or health code allegation. They'd learned the hard way that throwing around press charges and health hazard without backing would land their words in someone else's file cabinet. Mine. And for everyone watching this who's ever had an HOA bully wave fake authority in your face, do me a favor, hit like right now. So this video gets in front of the next poor soul fighting their own stack of bogus fines, because my war wasn't loud, but it changed everything on that street. A week after that bland little email announcing Brenda's personal reasons resignation, the neighborhood felt lighter. The first Saturday without her in charge, I was out back skimming the top of the stock tank when I heard giggles at the fence. Mom, look, the cows. 2 kids from 3 houses down were perched on the bottom rail, sneakers swinging, noses pressed to the slats. Their mom stood a few feet back, looking sheepish. Hope it's okay they're watching, she called. They've been dying to come see, but, she didn't have to finish the sentence. We both knew what "but Brenda" meant. Fence is public viewing. I said, smiling, come by next week, I'll have ice cream. Real stuff. From these ladies' cousins. I jerked my chin toward the steers. Word spread faster than any HOA newsletter ever had. People started knocking again, not with complaints, but with empty jars. Do you still do eggs? You got more of that cheese? Hey, how did you get them to back off? That one came from Jenna, one of Brenda's old Power Walk posse. No neon this time. Just a plain t-shirt and embarrassment. I didn't get them to do anything. I said, I just kept records and asked the people who actually have authority to weigh in. Paperwork did the rest. She hesitated. We got a letter too. saying an old landscaping fine was rescinded after review. My husband thinks maybe we should have fought it like you did. I shrugged. Fight's a big word. Mostly I filed. But if you want to see how I organized everything, I'll show you. It's not magic. It's tabs and dates. That's how my binder went from personal defense to community tool. One by one, neighbors came over with crumpled violation notices and old emails. This one says we can't park in our own driveway overnight. This says our swing set is an unauthorized structure. I pour coffee, lay their paper next to my county report, and walk them through it. Did they cite an actual section here? Did they give you minutes? Or just say the board decided? Did they threaten legal action or charges without anything from the city or county? Half the time, the answer was no, no, and way too much yes. I wasn't their lawyer. I told every single one of them that. But I could show them what had worked for me. Comm letters, certified mail, requests for records, and when someone threw around health or safety, a polite note to the offices that actually enforce those things. Inside 3 months, the HOA office looked very different from the outside. Brenda's golf cart patrols vanished. The new interim president, an older guy named Morales who actually read bylaws for fun, sent out a memo changing enforcement procedures. No more anonymous notes. Every notice had to quote the exact rule and attach photos. Anything remotely health or safety related had to reference city or county code. And if needed, be confirmed with those agencies before a single fine went out. The neighborhood Facebook group quieted down. No more blurry zoom-ins of my barn with dramatic captions. Occasionally, someone new would post, "Hey, what's that smell on Oak Street?" And 3 people would reply, "Dinner," or "Probably Eleanor's bacon in training." Even Todd, the anxious secretary, knocked on my door one evening with a 6-pack of fancy root beer. I wanted to say I'm sorry. He mumbled, eyes on his shoes. I signed some of those letters. I didn't know. I just figured Brenda knew what she was doing. She knew what she wanted. I said, "That's not the same thing." He nodded slowly. "The attorney basically used your binder as a training manual," he admitted, half laughing. "We had to sit through a whole workshop on due process because of you. Glad my tabs could contribute to higher education," I said. Life settled into a new normal. The hen scratched, the pig snuffled, the steers flicked flies with their tails. I kept my logs anyway, not out of fear, but out of habit. The county report sat in my binder, pages a little worn at the edges now from being flipped to as Exhibit A in half a dozen quiet little HOA disputes that never made it to golf cart theater. Sometimes I'd see Brenda's white SUV ghost through the neighborhood, headed somewhere else entirely. She never stopped, never rolled down her window. Once, at the 4-way stop by the pool, our eyes met through the glass. She looked away first. I didn't hate her. Honestly, I pitied her a little. It takes a special kind of insecurity to need that much control over other people's lives. But I also never forgot how fast she'd reached for my home, my animals, my reputation, waving press charges around like a toy gun. So I kept my hat, my flannel, my logs, and my binder. Because here's the thing about HOAs, Karens, petty bosses, and anyone else who falls in love with a little laminated badge. They come and go. The rules, the codes, the paper trail, that's what sticks. And if you're out there listening to this with your own yellow, friendly reminder on the fridge or a threat sitting in your inbox, wondering if you're crazy or if they're bluffing, remember, you don't have to scream to win. You can take a breath, pick up a pen, and start your own folder. In that neighborhood, the war with the HOA was over. But for those who know the system from the inside, they know there's always another committee president somewhere who thinks they're above the law. Subscribe to the channel and watch the absurd